seeing that there are not enough Lightroom tutorials of how I edit my cinematic photos on YouTube, I decided that I gotta have to make my own video and edit my own photos in a very nice and cinematic style that I have on my Instagram, because I was a film student in the past, so I have to utilize my degree somehow. So let's edit some of the photos together. The first thing I'm gonna say though is that before you even start editing, think about how you actually take your photos, because if you want to have a bright and colorful and sunny photo, you can't take it during the rain. So you gotta think about how you're taking those photos before you actually edit them. And if vice versa, if you want to get a moody and dark and gray photo, you can't achieve that if your photo was taken in harsh direct sunlight. I'm gonna show you how to edit both, because recently I went out and shot during this amazing misty and foggy and rainy weather, and I also went out and shot during very harsh light at 2 p.m. during the day. So I'm gonna show you how I edit both of those. These are gonna be photos of me and maybe of some of the models that I worked with. So I trained my boyfriend really hard to take photos for me. So they're pretty cool. I'm gonna show you. Let's start with the moody look that was taken during a very nice and gray, and well, you can basically see a gray and windy day. So the first thing I like to start with is actually tint, because I like my photos with a slightly greener hue. So I reduced my tint to +5. It's still on the pink side. Well, I forgot to mention that the first thing I did was actually crop this photo. I generally don't touch the temperature because I have my white balance set in camera before I actually start shooting. And if you want to know more about that, go take a look at the other video about editing that I shot like weeks ago. Take a look at that. I'm gonna reduce whites and highlights quite a bit. I like this flattened out look. I think it makes it look kind of cinematic, and if the photo is gray and the sky is blown out and white like it is over here, I think reducing the highlights is actually a great idea, because, well, you can see here like this, it just looks too white. So I want to make it gray, and with whites it kind of reduces the highlight contrast, you could say. So I drag it all down, and I'm not gonna touch the shadows and blacks and contrast and exposure yet. Then I'm gonna go to the tone curve, and my computer started making an annoying noise, so bear with me. I might have to just roll with it. But basically, one thing that annoys me so much is the S-curve. And every tutorial, every Lightroom tutorial you go to, or every tone curve explanation video on YouTube, everybody is gonna tell you to do the S-curve, as this is the simplest and the best thing to do. No, it's not. You have to judge by the situation, and S-curve, what it does, it just makes your photo really contrasty. I don't like my photos too contrasty. At the moment, I think it's a little bit too flat anyway. I am gonna reduce my highlights a little bit, and then I'm gonna reduce my halftones. I'm gonna keep this middle point up, but I do want to add more shadows. So what I'm gonna do, I'm actually gonna drag this point down, and you see it creates a lot of contrast in the shadows. So basically, if I were to up my highlight points, this creates a lot of contrast in my highlights, and I don't want my highlights to be very contrasty. So that's why I'm bringing my highlights down, flattening them out a little bit. I want to create more contrast in my shadows. So I'm bringing my shadow halftones down. So see, it's not an S curve at all. So you see, just with the tone curve, you already created a lot of contrast. I didn't even touch the contrast slide up here. I really do like how this looks. It already looks quite vintagey. And what you can do, you can go into reds, greens, and blues and play with them. I generally don't touch the red, green, and blue curve, but just to explain to you what it does, if I wanted my shadows to be more red, let's say, I'm bringing them up a little bit. So you see now my shadows are more red, and by reducing red, you leave with green and blue, and the combination of those colors creates cyan. So if you are reducing red, you are leaving yourself with the mixture of green and blue. The same with highlights. So for example here, I'm making my sky cyan by reducing reds. It's the combination of green and blue. And if I wanted to add more reds into the highlights, so if I bump it up, you see you add more reds to highlights. It's as simple as that. Let's go to greens. It's pretty self-explanatory, and if I wanted to reduce greens and I brought them down, see I'm left with purple, magenta. That's what you call it, because the mixture of red and blue that's you are left with, if you're reducing green, that's magenta. When I found out how it works, that basically by reducing one, you are left with the combination of the other two. I was so confused before, like why would I drag green down and suddenly purple appears out of nowhere? I couldn't really understand why this was happening. Well, now you know. If you were like me and couldn't understand, is that because when you're reducing one, you're left with the mix of the other two. So if I wanted to reduce blue, this is what happens. If you watched my other video on color theory, you will know that we are mixing not the colors here, but light, and that's why what we're left with is red and green, and in real life it would produce brown, but because these are not colors, this is not like a watercolor or, you know, the colors that you paint with on the paper, this is light, and so red and green in combination creates yellow. I generally don't touch these lights unless I want to go for something very creative, but with this one, because this was shot in ideal, at least in my opinion, conditions, I'm not even gonna touch the RGB slides. I'm just gonna touch this one, which is luminosity. I do like how the contrast looks right now. I'm gonna go to HSL slides. I don't like this green that they have here. I think it's too overpowering, it's too bright and too green basically. I want to make this image warm, so I'm gonna bring the greens down, but I'm not bringing them down all the way because I just think that's a little bit too much. So I still want to keep some of the greens there. And then to make it warmer, I'm gonna bring the green down to around here. Just again, you don't have to memorize these numbers. Just play with it and see what you like. And I kind of like this green tone. So I'm gonna actually bring it up a little bit. I'm gonna check what yellow does. You see yellow impacts this image quite a lot. So I want to reduce yellow slightly, and I'm gonna bring it down to orange. And I'm also gonna see if I wanna reduce the luminosity. I think I am gonna reduce the luminosity a little bit. And now that I reduced yellow, I actually think that I need more green in this image. So I'm gonna bring it down, bring it up. I do want to add a little bit more warmth into here. So I'm bringing orange up. I don't think aqua or blue will do much in this image. Oh, okay, so it does, the blue does affect the sky. So I'm gonna bring it down a little bit, reduce the luminosity a little bit. This is how we impacted the color already. So I made it slightly moodier, I reduced the yellows and greens. You might prefer this, you might prefer a brighter and more vibrant image, but I do prefer the image slightly less saturated, slightly warmer, and slightly more cinematic like that. And I do think I want it slightly more contrasted now that I reduced all of the colors. So I'm gonna up the contrast here. I'm gonna up the shadows just a little bit. One other thing I usually do is I use this split toning. What I like to do, I just set it saturation to 5 in both of them, and I usually bring highlights to green and I leave shadows here, and then I play with this balance slide. I do like that, but I think it's a little bit, I want more contrast basically and more moodiness, I guess. So I'm gonna bring exposure down. I'm gonna bring shadows down just a tiny bit. So yeah, this is the first one and I really like that. Let's go to a sunny photo. Okay, so this one is very tricky. I really dislike the weather conditions. It's absolutely not something I usually like shooting, but you know, sometimes you just gotta do what are you gonna do? You gotta deal with all of the horrible weather conditions and go make something out of it, because I just wanted to be creative and wanted to take some photos and basically challenge myself with editing something that's taken during really harsh weather conditions. And I'm showing you a photo of myself just because the light on this particular photo is horrendous. I did take some shots of my models in this same environment. I'm gonna show you how they turned out, but basically first I'm gonna show you how I edit these really horrible weather conditions. I hate this. I'm gonna bring the tint down to +5 again because I like slightly greener hues. I'm gonna reduce the highlights again and I'm gonna reduce the whites again. I'm actually gonna reduce the contrast here because this photo is just too contrasted. And I do want to reduce some saturation because this photo was shot during sunny weather, blue sky, harsh light, and I just really don't like how saturated it is. I really do prefer non-saturated and really kind of flattened out photos. But at the same time, I don't want to fiddle with colors too much and make them look too unnatural. Here, basically, I'm not gonna really do much in the tone curve. I just want to reduce the contrast, so I'm gonna bring down the midtones and flatten this image just slightly like this. And now I'm gonna bring back some of the shadows as well. I do think that my skin looks really red here, so I'm gonna bring the reds down and hue slightly to orange. One of the first things I do is I go to yellow and I just see what it will do if I reduce yellow completely, whether I need to reduce yellow completely. And here I just want to reduce yellow halfway, and I am gonna bring it up to green because basically yellow impacts all of this grass here, and you see changing green doesn't do as much as changing yellow hues. And then I'm gonna bring the greens down again and I'm gonna bring them down to yellow. And then let's take this orange slide. I am gonna up my oranges just a tiny bit, and I think I'm gonna actually reduce greens, bring the green hue to yellow even more. Again, I think I'm gonna bring reds to orange slightly more, and this I'm gonna keep here. So let's see what impacts the sky. I usually check whether it's aqua or blue because sometimes the sky is impacted more by aqua slides, sometimes it's impacted more by blue. So here I can see that aqua doesn't do much. Then I'm gonna check the blue, and yeah, it's blue that impacts the sky. I think I'm gonna leave the blue hue on 0, and I'm just gonna bring the blue down slightly. Then I'm gonna bring the luminosity slightly down. Okay, I'm gonna bring the highlights up to green again, and the shadows I'm keeping here. So I do want to make this hella artsy, that's why I'm gonna add some grain and like I'm gonna bump it up to the middle here. So what I'm gonna do, I'm actually gonna reduce clarity a little bit. I really prefer to reduce the clarity, especially on sunny photos, because actually adding clarity, it creates more contrast and it desaturates photos a little bit more. So I do like to make this kind of silky effect by reducing clarity a little bit. And I think I want to play around with tone curves a little bit more. Okay, so I do like this. I kind of want to make the yellow slightly more orangey. So I'm gonna bring the yellow hue down. I'm gonna use the brush to bring back the subject on the photo. And actually now I want to add a bit more contrast, but I'm gonna do it by bringing the blacks down. This is not my ideal photo. This is not my perfect type of photo, because what I showed you before, these moody conditions is what I always go for and I always love. So this kind of sunny weather photo I really prefer to stay away from. But if I have to work with something like that, I will try and make it. First of all, I will flatten it out. Wait, my leg has gone numb again. But if I had to deal with something like that, with a really sunny photo with the blue sky and harsh sunlight and awful weather conditions, which I prefer for the beach, not for photography, then I would just try and make it as flat as I can. I really do prefer my photos more flat rather than contrasted. When you shoot in harsh sunlight, the image turns out really contrasted. And let me show you what it looks like before and after. This is the before and this is after. And I think the difference in the skin tone and in the colors and in contrast is just tremendous. The main thing in your photo editing is gonna be how you actually shot your photos in the first place, because as I said, you can't make something look a certain way if this is like absolutely not how you shot it. You can't make a sunny day look all gray and moody, and you can't make a moody day look all nice and sunny. And if you want to try, of course you can, and you can desaturate the hell of the photo if you want. You're still not gonna get the same effect. So choose your days wisely when you shoot and how you shoot. Find the type of photo that you like, and generally I think it's so much easier to shoot during kind of gray and flat day, because just the light is gonna be so much softer, it's gonna be so much more beautiful, and it's gonna be so much easier to work with in Lightroom. But thus said, you can also make really great photos even if you shot during really harsh sunlight and harsh weather conditions. If you are trying to create a consistent portfolio or want your photography to look a certain way, for example for Instagram feed, choose the type of conditions that you like to shoot at least for the majority of your photos. Because yeah, I love gray and moody days, but at the same time I do challenge myself and I do shoot during sunlight as well. In the beginning, you will make your job so much more easier if you just shoot with the same conditions and choose to shoot during gray days only or during sunny days only. So yeah, I hope this was helpful, and these were like basically all of my secrets, and you can watch the previous video that I shot on color theory as well, and hopefully this will be helpful. And yeah, thanks for watching.